Start.
Good morning, everyone. I hope all are doing well. So, the topic of our presentation is pluralism in work environment, creating an efficient and diverse workplace. Let me introduce my team members. Myself, Rohit Kumar, will be giving the introduction. Zeet will put light on pluralism and multiculturalism, whereas Dilhit will talk about pluralism in workplace and Gitanjali will talk about multiculturalism in workplace. At last, Suraj will talk about the communication model. So let me start this presentation by a quote from William Sloane Coffin, the Jr., that diversity may be the hardest thing for a society to live with, but and perhaps the most dangerous thing for a society to be without. Now, let us understand what is multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is a way in which a society deals with culture diversity. Canada. Canada is the prime example of multiculturalism, where people from different cultures are living together and working together. There are two important theories that are associated with multiculturalism. The first one is melting pot theory. It describes that immigrant groups tends to melt down. That means they vanishes their own culture and follows a different culture. They don't want to remember their own tradition. On the other hand, in salad bowl theory, that is a more of a liberal way of multiculturalism in which people from different cultures coexist in culture diverse and but they retain the characteristics of their own culture. They celebrate it and they want to follow it and they want to carry it forward. Now I am going to putting I'm now I will talk about organization culture. Like different countries have different cultures, same is with the organizations. Like different organizations have different work ethics and how they perform their work. It gives the sum of values and rituals that serve as a glue to integrate the members of the organization. For example, giving a status report and stand up meetings for some organizations is important on a daily basis. But for some organizations, giving status report and stand up meetings, they want it bi-weekly or in a month. So it shows that there is a difference in their work ethics and how they want to perform their works. So now I will be handing over this presentation to Zeet for further explanation.
Thank you, Rohit, for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Seek, and before we move forward, let's brush up on some topics, some basics. The first one is monoculturalism. Now, it can be defined as to a society where people share a strong bond among themselves based on their identity. And this kind of society, it helps create a strong bond amongst people based on their identity, and also it preserves their heritage but at the same time it also discourages people from different cultures to becoming part of their culture. In today's environment, this is the least form of ideology that is preferred amongst the organizations because it reduces the amount of talent that an organization gets. Now, moving forward with multiculturalism, it is a type of environment where different backgrounds are working together. The workforce consists of different backgrounds that are working together, and they are all equal. And there is no dominant culture, and all the cultures have same rights and opportunity. It is very much an egalitarian society. Pluralism or cultural pluralism. It is often confused with multiculturalism because it's very much similar to it, but there is one big difference. That is, there exists one dominant culture. And that one dominant culture does not mean that it suppresses other smaller cultures. It means that, in fact, that they work together in such a way that they integrate and they celebrate the differences, and each and everyone has same rights, and they all work together towards the harmony. Now, to understand the concept of assimilation, let's take this example. Let's say there's exists in society where there is one dominant culture, and amongst that dominant culture, the smaller cultures exist. And now, that dominant culture is not accepting of the differences. In that case, what smaller cultures will do is they'll try to take on the identity of the dominant culture and then transform themselves into the dominant culture, and they are virtually indistinguishable. Now, this methodology is the least preferred because it's this ideology is not at all acceptable in today's environment, because today we talk about diversity everywhere, because in this case people will go through hardship while transforming, and thus which is not preferable. What we need is cultural integration, where different cultures exist together. Even though there is a dominant culture, though all the different cultures exist together and work together synergistically, and as a result, they work in such a manner that they prove best results. Now, to integrate, we need cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence can be defined as an ability of an individual to understand the cultural differences and being able to respond in a culturally sensitive way. Now this is what an organization should be aspiring towards. Now I will call forward my friend Gitanjali to discuss further.
Okay, thank you, Z. So, hi everyone, myself Gitanjali. And before starting talking about the multiculturalism, I would like to start with the famous quote by the Martin Luther King that we may have all come on the different ships, but we are now in the same boat. So, while working in a multicultural team, it can create some benefits also if we have a good knowledge of different cultures. However, if we don't have, it will certainly give some barriers. But focusing on some of the significant benefits, firstly, increase understanding and respect for the cultural differences. It's allow us, working with the different cultures, allow us to open and free exchange of ideas. And also it encourages employees to learn a second and a third language, which benefits them and makes them more flexible and more tolerant. Also, it's seen that creativity always increases when the teams works with the different cultures and they work more innovatively. If we have a situation, a problematic situation, and the different people from the different backgrounds are looking at it, they will look at it from a different lens and with a different perspective. Hence, it will bring in a wide array of ideas, solutions that will certainly benefit any team. When it comes to customers and partners, having a multicultural team always benefits because customers always like to talk to somebody who can speak their native language and who knows and understand the customs. Also, it gives an idea to our partners, to our business partners, that we respect them, we care for them, and we are easy to do business with. Aligning with increasingly global workforce. Since this fact is now clear that the world is shrinking and it's becoming a more smaller place, we come to know that different cultures take different times to evolve, and having a good awareness of this helps us to bring the groups together. Last but not the least is delicious treats. So I would like to use another quote by the book writer Deborah Cater that you have to taste a culture to understand it. So dealing with the multicultural allows you to interact with people and nourish the relations, because your daily meal might change a lot and this will benefit the team. Now focusing on some of the challenges. One of the major challenges always which is seen is the communication challenge. There could be the teams who like to talk directly, and there could be the people who follow an indirect way of communication. So this brings a point of conflict because in the direct ones, they like to talk and they like to ask about the priorities and options directly. However, indirect people don't want to share much information. Language barrier is another major problem because when it comes to accent and fluency, if one of the team member doesn't have the same fluency, then it might create some issues. It might create some intolerance in impatient employees. Conflicting norms for decision making. Now, when it comes to decision making, there are conflicts which are seen because there are managers who like to make decisions quickly with very little analysis. However, there are other managers who like to analyze more, discuss more before coming to a conclusion. Technical challenges are often seen in a team because if one of your team members is coming from a different part of the world, then he or she might not be aware of certain technology which is being used in your organization. And interaction of different people from the different cultures certainly arises some of the cultural biases. For example, thinking of a stereotype like all Asians are good at mathematics, it increases the false expectations and it creates a stress in the team. And now for the cultural pluralism, I would like to call the Lilith.
Thank you, Gitanjali, for giving us a wonderful explanation about multiculturalism in the workplace. Now let's take a look at some of the benefits and challenges of cultural pluralism in the workplace. And let's start with the benefits first. And the first benefit that I would like to talk about is that it promotes intellectual dualism. The managers and leaders of corporations as well as projects will be getting the opportunity to take in inputs from people belonging to different cultural backgrounds and incorporate these inputs into the decision-making process. But this helps them to make better decisions, provide better solutions to problems, as well as generate more innovative ideas. Now, another advantage is that it provides a better structure. So organizational culture, which is the dominant culture of the organization, lays down the ground rules and the team norms that should be followed by all of the employees of that organization, irrespective of their cultural backgrounds. So this provides a sense of structure and stability, which is quite essential to resolve conflicts as well as to minimize any kind of disputes from ever happening. Now, another advantage of cultural pluralism is that it avoids tribalism. Now, tribalism is a condition for humans to be more loyal to people who belong to their own cultures rather than other cultures. Now, this could result in formation of certain subgroups within project teams, and these subgroups could discriminate against each other on the terms of their cultural differences. But cultural pluralism avoids that by treating all of these minority cultures equally. And even managers, when solving problems or when resolving issues, doesn't show any sign of favoritism towards any culture. Another advantage of cultural pluralism is that it promotes unity. Now, every organization would be having a dominant culture, which is mostly the organizational culture. But if it's a culturally pluralistic organization, then they accept and acknowledge the cultural diversity that exists among its employees. This would in turn motivate the employees to work harder and more productively because they are more satisfied with their workplace and their company. An example of this would be that if there's a company that has a strict 45-minute lunch break policy, and if that company allows extended lunch break to its Muslim employees on Fridays for giving them time to go to the mosque and pray, that's a huge example of them being culturally pluralistic. Now let's take a look at some of the challenges associated with cultural pluralism. The first is that it could cause bunker mentality. Now, if there are minority people who belong to a particular minority, people belong to a minority culture, might demonstrate what is called as bunker mentality. This means they would demonstrate lots of sensitivity towards prejudice and would be really intolerant towards criticisms. Now, this would be quite difficult for managers because if the managers want to give them feedback, or if the managers want to even give them constructive criticism, these employees might take that in the wrong way and consider those as words of hatred against themselves or their culture. Another disadvantage or challenge is cultural relativism. Now, cultural relativism is basically the concept of judging a person's actions based on that person's culture rather than anyone else's culture. Now, this is quite confusing for certain managers because if an employee commits a mistake, then that might not actually be a mistake in the eyes of the employee, but it might be a mistake in the eyes of the manager. For example, inemuri is the act of sleeping on the workplace in Japan, and it's perfectly normal in Japan. But if a Japanese employee sleeps on the workplace in a US office, then according to the employee, he has not done a mistake, but according to the manager, he has done a great mistake. So that's an example of this. Another challenge is that it causes conversational difficulties. I mean, the dominant culture already solves a huge chunk of that problem by introducing a universal language for all the employees to converse in. But still, there are some problems that exists, like difference in accents, difference in vocabulary, the way how people express each other, and all those. Moreover, people have to be really careful when choosing words to make sure that they don't offend anyone, because some words are really offensive for some cultures. So for some people, that negatively affects their self-expression. Now, the last challenge that I would like to talk about is conflicts. So people belong to one minority culture might find it difficult to adjust to the beliefs of other cultures or even the beliefs of the dominant culture. This could cause conflicts. Employees might even think that managers might show favoritism or bias towards other employees who belong to their own cultures and beliefs. So this can even lead to further conflicts. It's also difficult to make decisions because making decisions that satisfies every single employee is hard. So decision-making process would be slower. Now that we know the benefits and challenges of both multiculturalism as well as cultural pluralism in the workplace, I invite my friend Suraj to explain some of the models that we can use to effectively deal with these challenges. Off to you, Suraj.
Thank you, Dilhit. So guys, so far we have established two things. First thing is diversity is important for any team or any organization to prosper. The second thing is communication is the most common challenge which any team will face. So in order to overcome this challenge, we have to focus on transactional model of communication. What is transactional model of communication? The transactional model of communication describe communication as a process in which it helps in generating social realities in social, relational, and cultural contexts. How is this different from the traditional approach? In a traditional manner, we have one sender, we have a receiver. Senders send a message to the receiver, and sometimes receiver send the message back in term of feedback. But when we are talking about the transaction model of communication, it is more than just sending and receiving messages. It's about two communicators who connect or relate to emerge as a group, to emerge as a community. So when we're talking about the transaction model of communication, there are four different contexts which are to be considered to have identity in a group, to emerge as a group. The first one is social context. When I'm talking about social context, it means when two persons communicate. When I mean the social context, it means when the two persons communicate, they have the context they talk about, they follow the social norms of the, and in talking about the relation context, it means when the two communicators are talking, they have some history. So when I'm talking to the person whom first time, there will be more examples, there will be more signs of maturity. But when I'm talking used to that person, the things will change. So talking about the cultural context, in cultural context, it means we have to consider the cultural background, the ethnicities, the differences of the origins of different peoples. So when we consider all this and communicate and use this approach, we help in developing better communities, help in aligning the cultures, shape of the self concepts. So in order to overcome this communications, we have to focus on three different things. The first thing is body language. So we have to understand that in a communication process, 90% of the time we have to, there is there is only non-verbal communication, which means in terms of speaking or the body language manners. When I'm talking about the tone of speaking, it means when the two person communicate, they should consider the pace so that other person could understand. The body language, the person is standing straight, the posture should be good. Same thing goes for manner. One has to understand when there is a space when we talk to the other person, they should maintain their things. Now I'll talk about the four strategies which we can use to overcome the communication barriers and help in developing relationship, trust, and confidence in the team. So first of the thing is choice of language. Talking to the other team member who is not from the same country, we should consider the use of idioms or the slangs the person may be not familiar with. And we have to also consider the non-communication verbal rules. We have to keep our body straight. We have to consider the manners like personal spacing. And the next thing we have to consider is the first language. Make sure when we are talking to the other person who is from different country, we should use simple language so the other person can understand. And the most important thing is to avoid using inappropriate references to their culture background, to their race. It will, all these things, strategies will help in developing trust and confidence. Last but not the least is, when we are talking, we have to you understand that there are four things which will help which will create confusion in cultural context. The first thing is a form of language. One should be polite when talking to me. For example, we can simply ask a person to just close the window, or we can say, would you please close the window? These simple things can make the difference. In different cultures, people will react differently to this thing. Use of idioms should be avoided, because sometimes if you're from the same culture or the same country, but you're from the different, there is a generation gap, it will make the difference. And we have to make sure while giving compliments that we have to consider the cultural background. Some cultures accepting we simply accept the compliment by just bowing your head down, whereas others, people expect to give us thank you notes. The last but not the least is the social customs. We have to consider the stereotyping. We don't have to avoid judging the other people, so that we can develop better bond in a communities. Next, I would like to call Dilhit to conclude this presentation.
Thank you, team, for explaining that wonderfully. Now that we understand that various challenges that are faced by the team as a manager, when we have a diverse team, there are different methodologies that we can use to eradicate those challenges. The first one, as we discussed, like the communication model. And the other one is like when the team development is taking place, setting up some rules to ensure that those issues do not take place, and creating the plan and strategizing in a manner that it's culturally sensitive. Understanding about cultural intelligence and educating the team about cultural intelligence is really important as well. And it's important that the team improves their collective cultural intelligence, in which we can go for workshops and classes for the whole team. And that we can also refer to the another webinar that we talked about different steps to improve the and maintain the team cultural intelligence. And on that note, I would like to say thank you, and thank you for joining us. And for the further content, please contact us on LinkedIn.